The blood hadn't dried yet when Magnolia Nola Brennan found the tracks. Spring 1878, 12 miles outside San Angelo, Texas. The overturned freight wagon sat like a broken skeleton against the endless prairie grass, its cargo scattered, its driver face down in the dust, with a bullet hole between his shoulder blades. Nola crouched low, her leather gloves brushing earth still warm from violence. 3 sets of hoofprints led northeast, horses carrying double weight, moving fast. 1 passenger dragged away against their will. Another escaped, running. She was 23 years old and the best tracker in West Texas. Her father, a cavalry scout who died tracking Comanche raiders 5 years back, had taught her to read land like scripture. Every bent grass blade told a story. Every disturbed stone was a sentence. The earth spoke to those who knew how to listen. She stood, shielding her eyes against the brutal afternoon sun, and saw him coming. A rider approaching hard from town, his black horse eating ground like it was running from the devil himself. The man sat the saddle with desperate urgency, and even at distance, Nola could see something broken in the way he moved. He pulled up fast, dust billowing. Late 20s, dark stubble covering a jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Work-worn hands gripping reins so hard his knuckles had gone white. Eyes that held the kind of fear that came from caring too much about someone in danger. "You're Nola Brennan." Not a question, a statement wrapped in hope and desperation. "I am. Garrett Kane. I work the Triple Star Ranch." He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion. "My boss was on that wagon. So was his daughter. Bandits took them both. I need someone who can track them before the trail goes cold." Nola looked back at the scattered wreckage, the blood-soaked earth, the story written in disturbed dirt. "Sheriff told you about me. Said you could track anything through any terrain." Garrett took a step, closer. His hands were shaking. "The daughter. Her name is Clara. She's 19. Those men have her." There it was, the crack in his voice that said this was personal. "How long have you loved her?" Nola asked quietly. Garrett's face went rigid. "Does it matter?" "Matters if it means you'll do something stupid when we catch up to them. I'll do whatever it takes to bring her home alive." His eyes met hers, and Nola saw something there she recognized, the willingness to burn the whole world down to save one person. "I need you, Miss Brennan. Name what you want. Anything." Nola studied him for 3 heartbeats. She'd turned down dozens of tracking jobs from men who wanted her to find things better, left lost. But this was different. $50 a day plus expenses, she said. "But I'm not doing this for money. Those tracks are getting colder while we stand here talking. You want my help? We leave now." They rode northeast into broken country, where the prairie gave way to canyons and rock formations that rose like ancient monuments. Garrett kept wanting to push faster, but Nola held them to a pace that let her read sign. 3 horses, she said, studying hoofprints in soft earth near a dried creek bed. All carrying double. 2 riders up front, 1 behind. The horses are exhausted. See how the stride shortens here? They've been running hard since before they hit that wagon. "How can you possibly know that?" Garrett asked. Nola pointed to subtle variations in the track depth. Front horses are favoring their right sides, weight distribution's off. That happens when animals are tired and riders are tense. And see this? She touched a scraped rock. Someone tried to cover their trail here. Amateur work. They're scared, which makes them dangerous but also sloppy. She found where they'd tried to lose pursuers by riding through water. Found where they'd emerged 300 yards upstream. Found the broken branch at shoulder height that said one rider was taller than the others. Every mile, the story became clearer. The woman, Clara, she's fighting them, Nola said, kneeling beside disturbed ground. See these scuff marks? She tried to run here. They caught her, but she's not going quietly. Something passed across Garrett's face. Pride mixed with fear. That sounds like her. Never did learn to back down from a fight. They rode in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Two people working toward the same goal, finding unexpected rhythm. Tell me about her, Nola said finally. Garrett was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Clara Donovan spent 2 years at finishing school in Fort Worth. Came back last month. I've known her since she was 12. That's when her father hired me on. I was 17, fresh from Arkansas with nothing but a good seat on a horse and a willingness to work. And you fell for the boss's daughter. Didn't plan to. Doesn't work that way, does it? His smile was sad. She used to follow me around the ranch asking about everything. How to gentle horses, how to read weather, how to fix a broken fence. Girl had more curiosity than the whole territory combined. She know how you feel? Never told her. What would be the point? I'm a hired hand. She'll marry some rancher's son, live the life she deserves. He looked at Nola. But I'll die before I let anything happen to her. Sunset found them in rough country, where sandstone formations cast long shadows. The tracks led into a narrow canyon with high walls that would amplify sound, dangerous ground for a nighttime approach. Nola raised her hand, signaling stop. They camped here recently. Horse droppings are fresh, maybe an hour old. She dismounted, walking the perimeter with practiced eyes. Found where someone had walked in small boots. Found signs of struggle near a cluster of rocks. Clara tried to escape again, she said quietly. They caught her. Dragged her back. Garrett's hand dropped to his rifle. For a moment, something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Something that said he'd kill without hesitation if given cause. We're losing light, Nola said, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. We can push on in darkness and risk losing them, or make camp and start fresh at dawn. How far ahead? Hour, maybe less. But their horses are spent. They'll have to rest, too. Garrett looked torn between urgency and sense. Finally, what do you think? The fact that he asked, that he trusted her judgment despite his desperation, meant something. We camp, rest, leave before dawn. We'll do her more good alive and smart than dead in the dark. They found shelter in a small box canyon with rock walls on 3 sides. Built a small fire that couldn't be seen from outside. Settled into the familiar routine of making camp. Unsaddling horses, checking gear, heating coffee. When the coffee was ready, Garrett finally let some tension drain from his shoulders. I want to apologize for how I came at you, back there. Demanding, desperate. You're scared for someone you care about. No apology needed. It's more than fear. He stared into flames. Clara left for school when she was 17. I told myself it was good, that she'd get education and opportunities beyond ranch life. But truth is, I thought about her every single day she was gone. Then why didn't you tell her? Because I'm nobody, just a cowboy who's good with horses. What do I have to offer someone like her? Nola poured coffee into tin cups. Maybe she should decide that for herself. They talked as night deepened. Garrett told stories about growing up orphaned, working his way across Texas, learning the cattle trade from men who were sometimes kind and often cruel. Nola told him about her father, about learning to track at 7 years old, about building a reputation that had spread across the territory. "You ever been in love?" Garrett asked. The question surprised her, but his tone was genuinely curious, not invasive. "Once. Army officer at the fort. Said all the right things until he got transferred east. Decided a woman who could track and shoot wasn't proper wife material. Married a banker's daughter in New Orleans instead." His loss. The simplicity of it somehow meant more than elaborate sympathy ever could. They took turns on watch through the night, when stars still blazed overhead, but eastern sky was lightening. Nola woke Garrett with a touch to his shoulder. "Time to move." They followed tracks deeper into canyon country as dawn broke. Nola moved slower now, reading every sign with heightened attention. They were getting close. She could feel it. Then she saw the smoke, thin tendril rising from behind rock formations, maybe half a mile ahead. She signaled Garrett to stop, and they left their horses in a sheltered draw, moving forward on foot with rifles ready. Nola found a position behind boulders that gave them a view into a natural clearing below. 3 men. 2 younger, rough-looking. 1 older with a scar running down his left cheek, clearly the leader. Clara Donovan sat near the fire, hands bound, dirt-streaked and bruised, but holding herself with fierce dignity. Her father lay nearby, also bound, clearly injured. Garrett made a sound in his throat. Nola put a restraining hand on his arm. "Easy," she breathed. "We need a plan. Plan as I shoot them. And if they use her as shield, if you miss in this light, we need to be smart." The 2 younger bandits mounted up, riding north to scout or find water. The leader stayed with prisoners. "Now," Nola whispered, "we circle. I come from north, you from south. We take him together when I give signal." They split up. Nola moved through rocks with practiced silence, getting into position. She was 30 yards from camp when a loose stone shifted under her boot. The sound was small. In that canyon, it might as well have been a gunshot. The leader's head snapped up. He dove for Clara, hauling her up as a shield, gun to her temple. "I know you're out there," he shouted. "Show yourself or the girl dies." Garrett stepped into view, rifle aimed. "Let her go. This doesn't have to end with more blood." "Drop your weapon." The bandit pressed his gun harder against Clara's head. "Now!" Nola moved silently, using his focus on Garrett to get closer. She could see Clara's eyes, frightened but calculating, watching for opportunity. The shot had to be perfect. She raised her rifle, breathed, let half the breath out, squeezed trigger. The canyon erupted with sound. The bandit's head snapped back. He fell, gun discharging harmlessly skyward. Clara stumbled forward into Garrett's arms. Nola emerged from cover, rifle still ready. But the man was dead. Single shot through the forehead. Garrett caught Clara, held her like letting go might kill him. Thank God you're alive." "Garrett." Clara's voice shook. "How did you? Later, are you hurt?" Nola went to check the bandit, definitely, dead. Then moved to Clara's father. Pistol whipped during the attack, head wound that needed attention. But he'd survive. "He needs a doctor," Nola told Garrett. "But he'll make it if we get him back to town." Clara pulled back from Garrett, though she kept one hand wrapped around his arm like she needed the anchor. "Who are you?" she asked Nola. "Nola Brennan. Tracker. Garrett hired me to find you." Something passed across Clara's face as she looked between Nola and Garrett. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition of something she hadn't expected. They got Clara's father onto one of the bandits' horses. Clara rode double with Garrett on his black stallion. The journey back to San Angelo took most of the day. Nola watched them during the ride, watched how Garrett held Clara like she was made of glass and dynamite, both. Watched how Clara leaned into him, grateful and shaken. But she also noticed something else. The way Clara's eyes kept finding Garrett's face, studying him like she was seeing him for the first time. The way Garrett's expression held relief, but also something else. Something complicated. By the time they reached San Angelo, the sun was setting. The town doctor took charge of Clara's father immediately. Sheriff wanted statements. The dead bandit turned out to be Jack Thornton, wanted in 3 territories. Reward money would be substantial. It was well after dark by the time formalities were handled. Nola stood outside the sheriff's office, bone-tired, ready for a hot bath and her own bed. Garrett found her there. "Clara's at the hotel with her father," he said. "Doctor says he'll be fine. Few days rest, and he'll be good as new." "Good." They stood in awkward silence. "I owe you everything," Garrett finally said. "That shot. Sheriff said it was one of the finest pieces of marksmanship he's ever seen. Just doing my job." It was more than that. He stepped closer. "The way we worked together out there, like we could read each other's minds. And the things we talked about last night around that fire." Nola's heart was beating faster. "Garrett, I need to tell you something." He ran a hand through his hair. "When I rode out to find you, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. I thought I loved Clara, thought saving her was about getting back the girl I'd been pining for. And now I realize I was wrong." His eyes met hers. "I care about Clara, want her safe and happy. But what I felt for her was, I don't know, admiration, affection, not love, not the real kind." Nola's throat went tight. "How do you know?" "Because being around you showed me the difference. The way we talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. The way you didn't need me to protect you, but let me be useful anyway. The way you understand hard work and independence." And he stopped. "I can't stop thinking about you, Nola, about your strength and your skill, and the way you smiled at me across that campfire. Garrett, we barely know each other. Then let me get to know you. Let me prove I see you for who you really are, and that's exactly who I want." 3 days later, Nola was in her small house on the edge of San Angelo when someone knocked. Clara Donovan stood on her porch, looking nervous and determined both. "Miss Brennan, may I come in?" Nola stepped aside, gesturing to the simple interior. One room with a bed, table, stove, and walls covered in maps. "Not much to look at." "It's honest. I like that." Clara sat at the table, hands folded. "I came to thank you properly for saving my life, and to talk about Garrett." Nola's stomach dropped. "Clara, let me finish." Clara's smile was gentle. "I've known Garrett Kane for 7 years. He's a good man. Kind, hard-working, loyal. When I was younger, I thought maybe someday—" She shook her head. "But the truth is, I never saw him that way. More like an older brother. Someone safe and familiar." "Then why? Why did he think he loved me?" Clara laughed softly. "Because I was convenient. Because loving the boss's daughter felt like the right kind of dream for a man who'd been alone most of his life. But it wasn't real love. We both knew it, even if we never said it out loud." She leaned forward. "But the way he talked about you when we rode back, the way his whole face changed when he said your name, that's real, Nola. That's what love actually looks like." Nola felt something crack open in her chest. "I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in." "Then learn. Because Garrett Kane is worth learning for. And from what he told me about you, so are you." Clara stood to leave, then paused at the door. "He's at the livery stable. He's been there every day, working up the courage to come see you. Maybe save him the trouble. Nola found Garrett exactly where Clara said he'd be, brushing down a chestnut mare with practiced strokes. He looked up when her shadow fell across the stable floor. Hope and fear warred in his expression. Clara came to see me, Nola said. She did. Garrett set down the brush. What did she say? That I should give you a chance. Nola stepped closer. That what you feel is real. It is real. Most real thing I've ever felt. I'm not easy to be with, Garrett. I take tracking jobs that keep me gone for days. I don't know how to be domestic or proper. I shoot better than most men, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I know. That's why I want you. I've been hurt before. So have I. We can be careful together. He reached out, took her hand. Just give me a chance to show you that not all men are like that, officer. That some of us see strength and independence and think that's exactly what I want. Nola looked down at their joined hands, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. All right, she said softly. All right. Yes. I'll give this a chance. Garrett's smile could have lit the whole territory. He raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. You won't regret this. Nola Brennan. I promise you that. The courtship that followed surprised everyone, including Nola herself. Garrett showed up at her house with wildflowers from the prairie, took her to the small restaurant in town where they talked for hours, borrowed a wagon, and drove her out to watch sunsets that turned the whole sky gold and crimson. But more than romantic gestures, he wanted to know about her work. Asked her to teach him tracking. Proved to be an attentive student, learning how to read broken grass and disturbed stones. Never once suggested she should give up her independence. Nola continued taking tracking jobs, though she was more selective. Nothing that required her gone more than a few days. The reward money from capturing Thornton's gang had given her financial breathing room. Meanwhile, Garrett had dreams of his own. He'd been saving wages for years, and with his share of the reward, he finally had enough. 300 acres east of here, he told her one evening as they sat watching stars emerge. Good grazing, reliable water, room for horses. I've wanted my own place since I was a kid with nothing. Sounds perfect, Nola said. It would be, if I had a partner. He looked at her. Someone strong enough to handle hard times. Someone who can track down a lost horse and shoot straight when wolves come prowling. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Nola's breath caught. Garrett. He pulled out a ring. Simple silver band with a small turquoise stone. Practical and beautiful both. Magnolia Brennan, I love you. I love your strength and your independence and your stubborn heart. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner in all things? Nola looked at the ring, then at Garrett. Thought about the walls she'd built around her heart. Thought about how he'd methodically dismantled them with patience and genuine respect. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. They married in September in San Angelo's small church. Clara attended, along with her father and several of Garrett's friends from the Triple Star. The sheriff came, the town doctor, several ranchers who'd hired Nola over the years. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. They moved to their 300 acres 2 weeks later. The cabin was small, 2 rooms and a loft, but solidly built. The land around it was beautiful, rolling prairie with cottonwood trees along the creek. They threw themselves into building their ranch. Garrett used his horse trading connections to acquire several good mares and a quality stallion. Nola continued taking tracking jobs, selective about which she accepted. The money she earned, combined with what Garrett made selling horses, let them slowly expand. They added a barn that first winter, working side by side to raise walls and hammer in the roof. Evenings, they sat together on their porch watching sunsets. Garrett played harmonica, a skill Nola hadn't known he possessed. She leaned against him, more content than she'd thought possible. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she admitted one night. Garrett kissed her head. "This is real. We earned this." "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. More than I thought possible." Their first year brought tests, drought-stressed water supply. 2 mares died foaling. Garrett injured his shoulder breaking a stubborn horse, had to rest for weeks. But they faced everything together. When Nola successfully tracked rustlers who'd plagued local ranchers, Garrett was the loudest in proclaiming pride in his wife's skills. When their mare produced twin colts, both healthy, they stayed up all night in the barn, ensuring babies nursed properly. In their second year, Nola discovered she was pregnant. Garrett picked her up, spun her around, then carefully set her down looking worried. "Did I hurt you? Should you be resting?" Nola laughed. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass." But she let him take over more heavy work as pregnancy progressed. She continued tracking through her 6th month, though she stuck to easier cases. Their son was born on a February morning, Daniel Kane, with his father's dark hair and his mother's fierce spirit. Garrett cried when the midwife placed the baby in his arms. "He's perfect." Over the next years, their family grew. Daughter Emma, then another son, Thomas. The ranch grew too. More land, bigger house, reputation for quality horses. Nola taught Daniel to track. By age 10, he could follow a trail nearly as well as she could. 2 decades after that first desperate ride to find Clara, Nola and Garrett sat on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the meadow. Daniel had married, taken over much of the ranch operation. Emma lived in Dallas but visited often. Thomas ran his own horse operation on adjacent land. "You ever regret it?" Garrett asked. "Giving up the freedom you had?" Nola looked at him, surprised. "I didn't give up anything. I gained everything. I still have my skills. Still take jobs when something interesting comes along. Only difference is now I have someone to come home to. I worry I held you back." "Garrett Kane." She took his face in her hands. "You didn't hold me back. You gave me roots while letting me have wings. Our life together has been the greatest adventure I could have asked for. I love you more now than the day we married." "So do I." On their 30th anniversary, they renewed vows at the ranch with all their children and grandchildren present. Clara attended, still one of Nola's dearest friends after 3 decades. As they recited the same promises made 30 years earlier, Nola felt the weight and wonder of all those years together. "I, Garrett, take you, Nola, to be my wife, my partner, my best friend. I promise to love you through whatever comes. I, Nola, take you, Garrett, to be my husband, my partner, my home. I promise to walk beside you through all our days." The celebration afterward was loud and joyful. As sunset approached, Garrett and Nola slipped away to the creek that ran through their property. "This is where I want to be buried someday," Nola said matter-of-factly. "Right here." "Me too," Garrett agreed. "Together, like we've been for everything else." They walked back hand in hand, surrounded by the life they'd created. When Nola was 70, she went on her last tracking job. A young girl had wandered from a wagon train. Despite age and arthritis, Nola's skills remained sharp. She found the child within 4 hours, cold and scared, but unharmed. "You just can't resist showing off," Garrett teased when she got home. "It's not showing off if you're actually that good." But they both knew that would be her last job. Time to pass knowledge to the next generation and enjoy well-earned rest. They spent their final years in gentle contentment. Garrett taught great-grandchildren to gentle horses with patience instead of force. Nola told stories about tracking outlaws and finding lost children. Every evening, without fail, they sat on their porch holding hands, treasuring each day together. When Garrett died at 78, it was peacefully in his sleep with Nola beside him. She woke to find him gone, his face serene, his hand still holding hers. At his funeral, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Nola spoke about the man she'd loved for more than 50 years. Garrett Kane was the bravest man I ever knew, not because he could ride or shoot, though he could do both. He was brave because he wasn't afraid to ask for help when he needed it. He was brave because he loved completely and openly. He gave me the greatest gift anyone can give, the freedom to be myself while still being loved. Nola lived 3 more years after Garrett died. She remained on the ranch, cared for by her children, but still fiercely independent. She walked daily to the creek where she and Garrett used to sit, talking to him as if he could hear. When she died at 81, it was in springtime when wildflowers bloomed, and the meadow was green and lush. They buried her next to Garrett under the cottonwood trees by the creek, exactly as she'd wanted. A simple stone marked their graves with a single line, "Together in all things." But their legacy lived on. Their children and grandchildren carried forward the values they'd instilled: hard work, independence, respect, and above all, love. The ranch remained in the family for generations. In San Angelo and the surrounding territory, people still told stories about Nola Brennan, the legendary tracker who could follow any animal through any terrain, and Garrett Kane, the cowboy who'd been smart enough to say, "I need you, name what you want," and brave enough to fall in love with the answer. Young women heard about Nola and realized they didn't have to choose between their skills and their hearts. Young men heard about Garrett and learned that strength came in many forms, including the strength to admit when you needed help. And on quiet evenings when wind blew across the prairie and sun set in brilliant colors over the Texas landscape, if you listened carefully, you might hear the echo of a harmonica playing and soft murmur of 2 voices, talking and laughing together. Garrett and Nola, together still, watching over the land they'd loved and the family they'd created. Their story never really ending, but simply transforming into something eternal. That was the true story of Nola Brennan and Garrett Kane. Not just a story of tracking and rescue, though it began with that. Not just a story of falling in love, though that was central to everything. It was a story about 2 people who had the courage to be themselves, who found in each other the perfect partner, and who proved that true love doesn't limit or diminish, but instead expands and enriches everything it touches. Garrett had needed a tracker and found so much more. Nola had thought she wanted to be alone and discovered that the right person didn't take away her independence, but instead gave her someone to share it with. Their story was complete. Their lives were lived fully and without regret, and the love they shared continued to ripple outward through generations, touching lives they would never meet, inspiring hearts they would never know. They had loved completely, lived authentically, and left the world better than they found it. And in the end, what more could anyone ask?